A royal guard. In handcuffs. What could his crime possibly be? This very moment, unfolding in the exclusive terminal of an airport, shocked all who witnessed it. The young guard, Aras, standing ramrod straight in his immaculate uniform, was suddenly being led away by two police officers. Was this just a routine arrest, or was there a far greater story unfolding behind the scenes? A priceless artifact, sent to an international exhibition. Aras was the only person tasked with its protection. But why, in the very act of performing his duty, had he suddenly become a target? Who had turned against this loyal guardian, and why? And most importantly, whose safety was truly in jeopardy? Aras's past was filled with a centuries-old secret known only to his family. Now, that secret was about to be exposed before the eyes of the entire world. Was this arrest a simple procedure, or was it a calculated move to break a chain of loyalty that had endured for centuries? To learn the truth and delve behind the curtain of this story, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. Because what I am about to tell you will shatter every rule you thought you knew. The private terminal of London Heathrow Airport was a serene sanctuary, separated from the rest of the world by a wall of cold glass. Here, everything existed in a perfect harmony of order and luxury. Polished marble floors, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with expensive perfumes, and people who spoke only in hushed whispers. At the center of this sterile environment, before a special steel safe containing a priceless historical artifact awaiting shipment to an international exhibition, stood a young man. His name was Aras. He was not merely a security guard, nor just a common watchman. He was an heirloom guardian. The immaculate crimson suit he wore suggested he belonged in this environment, yet his posture and gaze held the traces of a discipline far more ancient, far more profound than this world of luxury. He was like a living statue from another time, placed carefully within this modern decor. He did not let his eyes waver from the safe for even a single second, nor did he react to any movement around him. For him, at that moment, the world consisted only of that steel box and the trust within it. This was his duty, his oath, and the entire purpose of his existence. This silent tableau was shattered by the decisive steps of Kenan Boran as he entered through the terminal's automatic doors. Kenan Boran was not just a wealthy businessman. He was a man who felt his wealth and power in every cell of his being, a character who believed the world was meant to revolve around him, accustomed to commanding every detail. He was the largest sponsor, the greatest benefactor of the foundation to which the artifact belonged, and for this reason, he saw himself as the owner of this entire operation. From the moment he entered the terminal, his eyes scanned the space, finally landing on Aras, standing motionless before the safe. His brow furrowed instantly at the sight. He paused for a moment. This couldn't be right. Was the fate of this priceless heirloom, this legacy of centuries worth millions of dollars, truly entrusted to this young, expressionless boy? The lack of expression on Aras's face, his unshakable calm, and the cold professionalism he displayed in accordance with protocol, deeply unsettled Boran, a man used to keeping everything under his control. To him, this young man seemed too inexperienced, too nonchalant for such a vital task. In his eyes, Aras was a mere extra, dressed in an expensive suit but far from comprehending the gravity of his duty. Kenan Boran approached Aras, as if to test his aura, to shatter that imperturbable silence with a single word, a single glance. But Aras did not even turn towards him. His gaze was locked onto the steel safe. It was as if Kenan Boran wasn't there, as if his power and status had crashed against the invisible wall created by Aras's centuries-old consciousness of duty and been reduced to nothing. This indifference pushed Kenan Boran's control-obsessed nature past its breaking point. He felt humiliated in this situation where his power was not acknowledged, his status not respected. A poison of pure fury flooded his veins, a venom that demanded an immediate antidote. His fingers trembled as he reached into his pocket and pulled out his expensive phone. He dialed a number with a swift motion and brought the phone to his ear. On the other end of the line was the head of the foundation, Professor Jamil, a man who had dedicated his entire life to art and history, known for his wisdom. Kenan Boran, without even waiting for the professor to say hello, erupted, his loud and angry voice cracking like a whip through the terminal's silence. "Jamil Bey, what is this audacity? Is this the boy you sent? Look, I'm at Heathrow right now and I cannot believe my eyes. Are you aware of the colossal risk you're taking, sending this priceless trust, this historical heritage, abroad with such an amateur, a teenager with a soldier's posture?" There's no concern on his face, no sense of responsibility. He's just standing there, blankly. "This is an unacceptable error, and I will hold you accountable for it." His voice echoed through the terminal, drawing the attention of a few people. But Aras, as if all of this were happening on another planet, did not move a single millimeter. For him, Kenan Boron's furious tirade held no more meaning than raindrops beating against a window pane. He was behind the silent shield of his duty, waiting for the storm to pass. Kenan Boron, however, was expecting a frantic, apologetic response from the other end of the line. He imagined Professor Jamil would immediately correct this mistake, perhaps even apologize to him. But he did not know that the words he was about to hear in a few seconds would shake his entire worldview, built on power and status, to its very foundations. He was about to witness how the laws of a modern world could be rendered powerless before a tradition of loyalty tested by centuries. For now, however, at the peak of his anger and pride, he held his breath, certain that the reply would validate him. This silent confrontation was not just between two men, but between two different value systems, two different concepts of power. And the victor was yet to be determined. For a moment, Kenan Boron forgot to breathe. The phone in his hand no longer felt like a symbol of power, but a cold testament to his own ignorance and hubris, numbing his fingers. He slowly, almost as if it were a soiled object, placed it back into his pocket. His movements had slowed. The self-assured man who felt the world at his feet was gone, replaced by a pensive individual questioning his own standing for the first time in his life. The luxury of the terminal, its gleaming surfaces, its expensive armchairs, suddenly lost all meaning. All this material wealth seemed like a cheap decoration next to the spiritual heritage carried by the young man standing before him. Professor Jamil's words continued to echo in his mind, a legacy of honor. For generations. At the cost of their lives. These phrases were heavier, more valuable than anything he knew, anything he had ever bought, sold, or controlled. Until this day, he had believed that everything had a price. He thought that loyalty, trust, even honor could be purchased for the right sum. But now he understood that what Eros possessed was a treasure that could not be tagged with a price, a treasure passed down from generation to generation through blood, discipline, and an absolute sense of sacrifice. Kenan Boron wanted to take a step towards Eros, perhaps to offer an apology, or maybe just to utter a word that could express his astonishment. But his feet were nailed to the floor. What could he possibly say? "Forgive me, I judged you without knowing of your centuries-old heritage?" The words would sound ridiculous and shallow in the face of the situation's gravity. He now understood that Eros's silence was not just a security protocol, but an impassable border between his world and Kenan Boron's. Trying to speak to Eros would be as futile as attempting to converse with a monument. Monuments do not speak, they simply convey their message through their existence. And Eros's message was clear: the laws of my world are different, and your power is not valid here. Slowly, Kenan Boron sank into the nearest empty leather armchair. But this was not out of fatigue or to wait for his flight. It was the action of a student choosing a place to better observe his master. There was still time before his flight, and he decided to dedicate this brief period to this living lesson he would never forget for the rest of his life. He began to watch Eros, his eyes never leaving him. Now, every detail took on a different meaning. The rigid straightness of Eros's shoulders was no longer the pride of youth, but the weight of carrying the responsibility of generations. The slowness of his blinking rhythm showed the profound depth of his focus. The almost imperceptible shift of his body weight from one foot to the other every few minutes was a trained technique against the fatigue of standing in the same position for long hours. It was like the perfectly functioning mechanism of a machine. Every movement was calculated, every detail had a purpose. Flashes of his own life seared through Kenan Boron's mind, the brutal boardroom battles, the merciless strategies he devised to crush competitors, the extravagant galas he organized to display his power. All these noisy, aggressive victories suddenly lost their luster in the face of Eros's silent and noble stance. He had conquered fortresses his entire life, but he had done so with noise, destruction, and leaving a trail of ruin. Eros, on the other hand, was protecting a fortress by turning his own body and soul into one, silently. Which required greater strength. For the first time, Kenan Boron felt the spiritual emptiness of his own achievements. What would he leave behind? A fortune that would be spent and depleted, a name that would be forgotten? And Eros? He would not leave his children money and property, but a legacy that could never be taken from them, a legacy of honor, a sense of duty, and a code of conduct. This thought pierced Kenan Boron's heart like a needle. He tore his gaze from Eros and looked at the steel safe he was guarding. He no longer saw it as just an insured object. He didn't know the color or shape of the artifact inside, but it no longer mattered. He could now feel, within that steel box, the memory of a civilization, the soul of an artist, the joys, sorrows, and struggles of centuries. And he understood that such a treasure could only be protected by an equally profound sense of duty. Not by a guard working for a salary, but by an heirloom guardian who had dedicated his life to this cause. Just then, the first boarding call for his flight echoed through the terminal. It was like a bell, waking Kenan Boran from his reverie. It was time to return to reality, to his own world. He slowly rose to his feet. He straightened his suit, but this time, the gesture lacked any trace of his old arrogance. He hesitated for a moment. He had to do something before he left. It was necessary for his own self-respect. With slow, deliberate steps, he walked towards Aras. But this time, he did not invade his personal space. He stopped a few feet away from him. Aras, though he sensed his approach, gave no reaction. His eyes were still on the safe. Kenan Boran stood in silence for a few seconds, then gave a slight, almost imperceptible dip of his head. It was a bow, a salute, an apology, and above all, an expression of a newfound, profound respect. It was a gesture more powerful than words. This gesture was not for Aras, but for Kenan Boran himself. It was his acceptance of his own hubris's defeat, his submission to a new truth. Then, without a word, he turned and began to walk slowly towards his boarding gate, leaving behind him Aras, standing silently at his post as if nothing had happened, and the centuries-old legacy he protected. As Kenan Boran walked towards the boarding gate, his steps were heavier, more thoughtful than ever before. It was as if he had left the burden of his arrogance behind in the terminal and, in its place, had taken on the weight of a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. When he reached the gate, as if by instinct, he looked back one last time towards the center of the terminal. The image he saw was etched into his mind like a masterpiece painting. People were rushing to and fro, suitcases were being dragged, announcements were blaring, children were running about. Everything was in motion, everything was temporary. And in the middle of this chaotic flow, Aras stood motionless, a rock transcending time and space. He was the fixed point in this transient world, the eternal oath within this temporary current. Kenan Boran smiled faintly. It was not a smile of victory or defeat. It was a smile of relief that came from understanding, from realization, and from respect. Then he turned his back and returned to his own world, to his loud and hurried life, but he was no longer the same man. He had seen the power of silence. After Kenan Boran had vanished from sight, the terminal returned to its previous state for Aras. But this was not the world that others saw. From the outside, he was still a motionless, cold statue. But internally, a complex and tireless mechanism was at work. His stillness was, in fact, the external manifestation of a high-tension activity. He was not just looking, he was scanning. His ears were not just hearing, they were discerning. His senses, sharpened by years of training, instantly registered details that a normal person would not even be aware of. He could hear the click of a suitcase latch from 30 meters away, the subtle change in the rhythmic hum of the ventilation system, even the jingle of a coin dropped at the other end of the terminal. Though his eyes were fixed on the safe, his peripheral vision analyzed every movement, every shadow around him. His brain processed this stream of data continuously, distinguishing potential threats from normal activities. A family passing by with smiles, harmless. A businessman moving with hurried steps, potentially noteworthy, but his behavior is natural. Someone passing too close and looking at him for too long, a red flag. This was his world, a silent battlefield built on probabilities and risk analysis. This was a discipline inherited from his forefathers. The principles engraved in his mind since childhood had now become his instincts. His father's voice echoed in his ears, "The greatest danger, Aras, never comes from where you expect it. The greatest danger hides in that 1 second when your attention is distracted." Or his grandfather's advice, "Your body is your fortress, and your will is the walls of that fortress. The stronger the walls, the safer the treasure inside." Fatigue, hunger, thirst. These are the demands of the body, not of you. You must command them, not them you. These words were not just advice to him, they were the laws that shaped his existence. He felt the ache in his shoulders, the fatigue accumulating in his legs. But these feelings were like faint signals from a distant planet to him. He registered these feelings, but he did not surrender to them. He regulated his blood circulation with imperceptible muscle contractions, keeping his heart rate and mind calm by breathing in a special rhythm. This was an incessant internal battle, invisible from the outside. He was the absolute master of his own body and mind. The hours replaced one another. As the sun's position changed, so did the angle of the light falling into the terminal. The shadows on the marble floor stretched and shortened. The density of people sometimes increased, sometimes decreased. But for Aras, time flowed differently. For him, Time was not measured by the hands of a clock, but by the security of the safe before him. Every passing second was proof that his duty was being successfully carried out. For a moment, a child of about 5 or 6, running with a red ball in his hand, fell, and the ball rolled to a stop just inches from Aras's feet. The crying child looked towards him from his mother's arms. The gazes of a few people around turned to Aras. A normal person in such a situation would instinctively bend down, pick up the ball, and give it to the child. But Aras did not move. His eyes did not for a moment shift to the ball or the child. His brain had analyzed the situation in a thousandth of a second. Child fell, ball rolled, mother picked up the child. No threat. To react would mean to divert attention, even for a moment, from the primary task. And that was an unacceptable risk. The child's mother, though momentarily surprised by Aras's coldness, quickly came and picked up the ball and moved away. For Aras, this incident was just another external stimulus that had been neutralized. His loyalty was even stronger than his human reflexes. He was not just a man, he was a living protocol. And his duty was above all else, even a child's red ball. As time slowly marched on, the dynamics of the terminal changed, but these changes had no effect on Aras's unshakable discipline. Finally, a new kind of activity began to stir in the distance, at the terminal's entrance doors. It was not like the arrogant entrance of Kenan Boran or the hurried flow of passengers. This was different. A group of 3 individuals entered with synchronized steps, making no noise. They too wore dark suits like Aras's, but of a more functional design. Their posture, their gaze, and their movements clearly showed that they were products of the same training, the same discipline. They did not speak, they did not look at each other, they simply moved as a single organism. They were the special transport team that would take custody of the heirloom for the next stage. Their arrival was a sign that Aras's watch in the terminal was nearing its end. But for him, this was not a moment of relief. On the contrary, this was one of the most critical phases of the operation, the moment of handover, and his focus now had to be sharper than ever. The group came directly to Aras and the safe. But there was no greeting, no exchange of words between them. This was not a meeting of people from 2 different worlds, but the merging of 2 different parts of the same system. The leader of the group stepped 1 pace forward and extended a small, black tablet to Aras. Aras, without ever taking his eyes off the safe, took the tablet with his left hand. His gaze scanned the screen rapidly. On the screen was a complex code of numbers, symbols, and a special seal. This was their silent language of communication. Aras's mind compared this code with another one he had known by heart for generations. Once the match was confirmed, he handed the tablet back without any change in expression. This silent confirmation was the signal for the operation to begin. The other 2 members of the group began to detach the safe from the platform it was bolted to, using special tools. Every move was measured, every sound minimized. They were like surgeons performing an operation. During this process, Aras was no longer in front of the safe, but had taken a position from which he could fully control the operation. His duty continued until the safe was securely placed in the special armored transport vehicle. He was still the sole, supreme guardian of the trust. This unusual scene had caught the attention of the few remaining passengers in the terminal. People whispered, and some dared to take out their phones to record the moment. In their eyes, this was an interesting event. Perhaps a movie was being filmed, or perhaps it was the transport of some rich man's strange possession. For them, it was a story to be shared on their social media accounts, to be forgotten a few hours later. They saw a heavy, steel box being moved. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't see, was the oath that had been passed down through generations to protect that steel box, the lives sacrificed for this cause, the silent devotion of Aras, who had set aside his youth and all the joys of a normal life. The image that fit on their phone screens was only a superficial layer of reality. The real story was invisible, because to understand this story, one needed to have different eyes, a different soul. Aras felt this attention, but for him, these gazes were as meaningless as a drizzle against a window. His reality was on a completely different plane from the reality of these people. The safe was finally placed on a special trolley, and the group began to move it towards a special exit that opened directly onto the tarmac. Aras walked with them, a shadow by the side of the safe at every moment. As this silent procession moved forward, one couldn't help but wonder, what had this young man given up for this duty? The sincere conversations with friends, walking hand in hand with a loved one, the spontaneous joys of a carefree youth. His life was spent in airports, hangars, hotel rooms, and in the silent witness of the trusts he had to protect. To many, this might seem like a tragic life. But it was more than a sacrifice, it was a service to a purpose. While other people collected fleeting digital memories, he was protecting the priceless, tangible memory of humanity. While others sought personal happiness, he was serving a collective heritage greater than himself. His reward was not money or fame. His reward was the deep, silent pride he felt after successfully completing each mission and the spiritual peace of not having betrayed the spirit of his ancestors. Finally, the group reached a black, armored vehicle parked at the edge of the runway, plain on the outside but clearly fortified. The safe was placed inside with the same care and precision. Aras took one last look around, checking for any anomalies. Then, without any hesitation, he too entered the vehicle. His place was always beside the trust. A few seconds later, the heavy, armored door closed with a characteristic sound, isolating Aras and the historical legacy he protected from the rest of the world once again. The silent story that had unfolded in the terminal was now over. Its witnesses were Keen and Boron, who had learned his lesson, Aras, who had completed another stage of his duty, and now, you. The unassuming vehicle started its engine and, blending in with the other service vehicles of the airport, slowly disappeared from view. Inside, far from the noise of the modern world, a trust and its silent guardian were moving on to the next stage of their centuries-long journey. After the armored vehicle disappeared among the endless concrete pathways of the airport, that spot in the terminal remained empty. The marble floor that, just a few hours ago, had been a stage for a silent battle between a centuries-old tradition and modern hubris, had now reverted to being an ordinary, meaningless space. The curious gazes had dispersed, the phones were back in pockets, and life had returned to its normal, hurried flow. It was as if nothing had ever happened. But this was only an illusion. Because what had transpired at that spot had forever changed the world of at least one person, Keen and Boron. Gazing at the clouds from the window of his ascending plane, Keen and Boron was no longer thinking about the cities, the factories, and the fortune below. In his mind, there was only one image, one face, that young man, standing motionless before a steel safe, with no expression on his face, yet whose very existence challenged all the power centers of the world. Aras. He no longer thought of Aras as a person, but as an idea, a principle. He had realized the possibility of a power that money and status could not buy, a strength that threats and anger could not shake. He now understood that what holds the world together is not the noisy conquerors like himself, but the millions of invisible heroes like Aras, who perform their duties silently, with honor, and without expecting any recognition. This lesson was more valuable than all the wealth he had amassed in his life. This story is not just an incident that took place at an airport. It is the embodiment of a profound truth that we witness every day but often fail to notice, the deceptiveness of appearances and the true nature of real power. We have been conditioned to seek power in noise, in ostentation, and in material wealth. But we forget that the strongest buildings rise on the deepest and most silent foundations. Like Aras, like those royal guards who stand motionless for hours in front of Buckingham Palace on the streets of London. Those soldiers, who often become objects of ridicule for tourists, who sometimes endure disrespectful behavior and even insults, are in fact living monuments of an iron will and unparalleled discipline. Behind their stillness lie months of physical and psychological training, the ability to ignore pain and fatigue, and above all, an absolute loyalty to the tradition and duty they represent. Their silence is not weakness, it is the highest form of self-control. Their lack of response is not helplessness, it is proof that their duty is superior to any personal feeling. True power is not about controlling others, ruling over them, or crushing them. True power is, first and foremost, about controlling oneself. It is the ability to rein in one's own ego, anger, fears, and weaknesses. True power is the ability to remain true to one's principles and values even in the most difficult moments, even when no one is watching. It is hidden in the silent sacrifice of a mother for her child, in the tireless effort of a doctor during a night shift, in the hope that a teacher instills in their students. They do not expect applause, they do not make headlines. But it is thanks to their silent loyalty that the world becomes a more livable place. Keen and Boron was mistaken in seeking power externally. But he was able to show the nobility of understanding his mistake and showing respect. But what about us? Can we see the heiresses around us, appreciate their silent sacrifices, and approach the depths of different cultures, traditions, and concepts of duty with respect? Or are we too caught up in the noise of the modern world, seeing only things that glitter but are hollow inside? This story is an opportunity for us to ask ourselves these questions. The challenge lies in tuning our senses past the deafening roar of the superficial. Our world celebrates the grand finale, the billion-dollar deal, the viral moment, but it forgets the thousands of quiet rehearsals that made it possible. It forgets the architect's lonely nights before the skyscraper gleams, the farmer's pre-dawn labor before the feast is served. To find the irises of our world, we must learn to listen for the silence between the notes, to appreciate the strength and stillness, and to honor the commitment that seeks no audience. When we begin to do this, something remarkable happens. The world transforms. We start to see a web of quiet courage holding our society together. We find inspiration not in the fleeting fireworks of fame, but in the steady, enduring flame of integrity. And in valuing them, we reclaim a part of that power for ourselves, the power to live a life of purpose, even when the world isn't watching. So where, and in whom, have you seen true power? Who is the silent hero that has impressed you the most? Perhaps it is your father, who goes to work with the same discipline every morning. Perhaps it is your mother, who endures every hardship. Perhaps it is a stranger you don't even know, who simply does their job with dignity. Share your thoughts and stories with us in the comments. If this story touched you, please like our video, share it with your friends to spread this profound message to more people, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. By clicking the bell icon, you can be instantly notified of new videos. And never forget, the mightiest mountains rise on the deepest, most silent foundations. True power is not about crushing others, but about holding on to your principles with unshakable loyalty.